Welcome to Finding the Frame. On this episode, we'll be chatting to a cinematographer who hails from the Australian outback and has brought his unique visual style to everything from NBC's Young Rock to James Gray's Ad Astra and Peacock's latest romantic comedy series, Laid. He's known for his bold cinematic framing and his ability to create distinct visual worlds, and it is my pleasure to welcome to the pod DP Judd Overton. So talk to me. Tell me about how this all started. You know, over in the Australian outback, how did you become a cinematographer? What made you want to become one?
Yeah, where I grew up, it was very isolated, but we did have a lot of news crews, sort of current affairs and documentary makers would come through. And then when you're in such an isolated area, people always drop in, you know. So if it's half an hour till the next property, the next station is what we call them, cattle station. You know, often we would have people just stop in. Sometimes they need some petrol, gas to get up to the next place, or sometimes they just want to see a face. So we end up meeting a lot of people that were from outside of the world that I'd been growing up in. And I remember one particular one had, was a camera operator for a current affairs show, and he'd just been filming the America's Cup had been in Australia, so 80s, and he was come back from hanging off the side of all these yachts and doing all this kind of layering about, and we were filming and he's on the back of my motorcycle and we're chasing along over sand hills and getting these low shots and swooping around, and I'm just like, this is incredible. What a great job. So that sort of gave me a taste for it, a bit of that reckless adventure sort of lifestyle and approach to things. So then when I moved down to Adelaide to sort of the big city for my for schooling, I continued that passion, and I started doing work experience in news stations and TV, networks, things like that. Just always sort of trying to get in and see what this is all about. I didn't specifically know that cinematography was where I was headed, but then I did some filmmaking through high school, just stop motion stuff, Super 8 things. We actually had a little VHS camera when I was growing up, so my brother and sister and I used to make little, knockoffs of James Bond movies and those sort of things. So, there was a little bit of a taste for it, of the behind the scenes. I definitely didn't want to be up front of the camera. So that was sort of gave me the taste for it. And, once I got to the city, I sort of found, more and more about it. I ended up getting an opportunity through the ACS, which is the Australian Cinematography Society, and they would have regular meetings. So I met some of the guys and women from that, and they sort of encouraged me to kind of, again, just come in, and I started to get work, cleaning cars and doing those sort of things at some of the news stations. And then as part of that, I was also getting trained up to be a camera assistant, record sound, take the tripod out, charge all the batteries, all that sort of stuff. So I just sort of continued along that path for a while, and then eventually got the opportunity to go to be an in-house camera assistant at a production company, a commercial production company. So the boss there, the cinematographer, Ernie Clark was his name. He was a very experienced commercials guy, and he sort of took me under his wing and trained me up. That was all shooting originally 16 mil and then 35 mil.
Oh, cool.
So I sort of trained up as a loader, and then I was there for 2 years. I started focus pulling by the end of the time there, and then once I finished there, I sort of branched out and started freelancing. At first in Adelaide, working on there was quite a few features there through the South Australian Film Corporation. They sort of had quite a good run there for a number of years, so I could get the opportunity as the local. Often it was either international or national crews coming in to make these films, but I could kind of get on the crew and obviously learn a lot of skills. And I've been working as an AC for about 10 years when I got the opportunity to go to the National Film School up in Sydney. So that was too good an opportunity to pass down, even though I was progressing career in that sort of trajectory of camera assisting and sort of moving through the ranks. the opportunity to go and do the master's course at AFTRS, and spend 2 years making films. So it was all we did really. So I sort of came out of that film school with a reel, and I had my my student film, my 35mm student film, played at Camerimage in the student competition there, and that was just a kind of a really good kind of leap up a step, and I never looked back, just kind of kept shooting from there.
Yeah. So the Australian film industry has produced some amazing cinematographers. How did being at AFTRS and things like that, how did that shape your approach to the craft, or your visual style? Was there a thing that informed the way that you were capturing things?
It definitely opened. We watched a lot of movies there, and opened up our view to things, to cinema that we hadn't necessarily seen before. The pathway, or where the film school fits on the scheme of things, they try to find you kind of halfway through your career. They don't want you necessarily to be just brand new. But they also don't want you to be so far down the track that you're set in your ways, and you've only got your way is the only way. So I think it was really great. And I went through, with a group of peers. So there were 4. I was one of 4 cinematographers in my year, and then we worked with all the directors and producers and production designers. We sort of collaborated on different projects with each of them, and then I would operate for another, Jules Overton is another Australian cinematographer who was in my year. He operated for me, I operated for him on a number of projects, things like that. So you're really kind of forming these relationships as you're learning how to expose. I mean, I'd made a lot of short films myself. Every year I'd sort of collect all the 16mm short ends from from these commercials and things that I was shooting, and go out and make something at the end of the year. And they were again an experience. I think they've all been buried now, but it's just such a fun thing. And then again, I was the cinematographer, whereas I'd only been assisting and doing a little bit of pulling focus, but I was responsible for the lighting. I was responsible for the for the exposure, and for starting to work with colorists and seeing that telecine, that transfer process, which is obviously a big part of it. And then at film school also, I was really just on the cusp of that, the change to digital. So that was a really, eye-opening process as well. We had the opportunity to both shoot film, and my first 35mm project was edited on a Steenbeck, and you really got to see that full process the whole way through. So I had an appreciation for that. But also, we're at the cutting edge. We had a lot of people. Andrew Leslie came in and spoke to us. John Seal came in and spoke to us. A lot of people, a lot of these amazing cinematographers, whenever they were in town or shooting a project, the school would kind of arrange for them to come and give a chat, and we could ask questions, and you really kind of get to see, the big picture. You really get to see. I mean, it makes it a lot less daunting for someone who's, sitting in Australia a long way away from, all these kind of big Hollywood movies or any of this sort of stuff, to see these guys and have access and chat to people about their process and about how they do it. It just made it a lot more approachable, I guess.
When you said about working with film, first of all, and then, kind of overseeing or being part of the switch over to digital and everything like that, do you think that gave you a good background actually working in with the film and everything like that, which is people aren't necessarily getting these days in film schools either, because we're now all digital. There's very little that's being shot film-wise unless you get into the big schools because it's so expensive. What I mean? So would you say that gave you something extra, something more in-depth as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I think so. I think everything you do, you take something away from, so every skill, any chance you get to play with new technology or old technology, you take that training and then you can use that for other things. I mean, I think the thing about the film, shooting on film, was the process. More than anything else, that's sort of the thing that stuck with me, I think, is that there was a really beautiful process about protecting what's happening on set and building up to a certain moment where everything has to work. I think that's one of the things that's gone by the wayside these days, because there's a lot more, people think that they're going a lot faster, but in fact, you're not going faster. You're actually just doing more takes and putting more data in for the post-production to deal with, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, Shane always used to say that you were a lot more accountable when the film was rolling. You know what I mean? Because everything was costing. And if it kept going for longer and longer, or somebody messed up, then that was it. Then you had to, whereas I suppose with digital now, you can do a lot more one-ers, a lot more things whereby you can just stop and start again if there's a problem. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah. And I think, whether or not you're actually succeeding, like, you might want to do these one-ers, but by the time you've done 10 of them, you're kind of trying to think, was take two actually okay? Or why do we go again? Like, it's all that sort of stuff. Whereas if you're trying it and attempting it and practicing it and getting everyone on, there is a nervous energy there, and rightly so, because if you mess it up, it's, people are going to be frowning at you. But, part of that nervous energy, I think, is a good thing, because it means that everyone brings their A game. It means that everyone's really focused, and it's creating a world on set for the actors who can really, feel supported, or feel, that they're getting their chance, they're getting their moment. Whereas a lot of the time now, did we get that? Yeah, well, we sort of got it somewhere, and we've got 3 cameras on it, so that's it'll have to do. We've got to move on.
Yeah. Would you? So at what point then? Was it the Camerimage moment where you won? For your short film, or what was the point at which you really thought that you'd broken it, or not broken into the industry, I suppose? You know what I mean? That you'd reached a point where you could take this even further and become one of the master cinematographers.
Yeah, I think I'll let you know when I get to that. No, I think it's always.
You would get a bit nervous about that question, but I thought afterwards,
Yeah, I think it's every step along the way, and I think it's really important to acknowledge those breakthrough moments, and really when you get those, the support. I mean, when I got into the film school, I felt that was a really great moment. It was kind of the moment when, I could say to my parents, look, it's going to be okay. There is some sort of career here. And then again, coming to the States and being able to make a life here, shooting movies and TV shows here, again, it's just a big opportunity. But you're always, you're looking at your last project, and it's like, okay, how do we make this better? And I think that's just part of being an artist and a perfectionist, if I dare to say that. Like, you're always just trying to make the next one a little bit better, and you're looking at what you've done previously, and you're saying, oh, okay, that, I see what worked about that, but there's always room for improvement.
In terms of, so obviously you've just mentioned it there, you've worked across a range of features and television and commercial and things like this, and we'll definitely put a few examples up when this goes out. But how does your approach then shift between those different mediums? When you're doing a commercial, when you're doing a TV, is it the same approach, or do you try and do something different with each different medium?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no is the answer to that. I always try to do something new for each project. Like when I'm reading a script, I'm trying to find out what that kernel is, that what's something different or new that I haven't done before, or something that I can kind of get into. Wow. That being said, I said before that every little thing that you try, everything you learn, I feel like applies and helps you with every project you do. And I think, for example, coming from Australia, where we have to do, to make a career, to eke out a career, I do a lot of documentary, commercials, feature films, the whole gamut of productions. And you learn a lot through doing that. If you're the sort of like a one-man band kind of filmmaker, and you're bringing your lights in your backpack, and you've got to, sort of carry everything with you and travel around the world, you're learning things about the right time of day to shoot things. You're learning things about scheduling and production that usually on a bigger production somebody else is going to take care of. So I think it's really about understanding a process, understanding what the limitations are going to be for the project that you're on, and sort of using what you've done before to help you push through to the next thing, to sort of overcome the next challenge.
Yeah, one of the things I read a great article that was with, I think it might be with the Australian Cinematographer magazine or something like that, with you, and it was right during COVID or right after COVID, and it was talking about when you worked on Ride the Eagle or Ride
Yep.
with the Eagle with Jake Johnson, and it was about you filming up in Yosemite, and because obviously COVID had happened, there was all these, everybody had to be scaled down, so it was pretty much you and a much smaller crew. Was
Yeah,
that something that you brought in all these ideas from when you were documentary, where it's a lot more scaled down, 2 or 3 of you working on it? Was that
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was like the only way to achieve that project. And in a way, that project was written for that time. We had a TV series that was about to shoot, and when COVID got, sort of shut us down, to the point that we'd already pre-lit the space, and we were at Panavision, getting our gear out, and they were like, nope, put it all back in boxes. So, a few weeks into that, we kind of went, well, if this is going to be how we live, or who knows how long this is going to go on. We still want to be creative. We still want to make things. What can we do within the parameters of that? And it's like, well, you can have 1 or 2 actors. You can have a really small crew, and you can shoot over a longer time. Everyone was accommodated in the house that we were shooting. It was almost like going back to the student film days, but the caliber of actors we had was incredible, and they all wanted to be a part of it. Susan Sarandon's in the movie. We flew across the country, the director and myself, to go and shoot the scenes with her, and picked up a sound recorder over there, those sort of things. So you just, you have to be flexible, and it's really, the question is, what's the story, what needs to be on the screen, and then you reverse engineer back to how to achieve that.
Yeah. Is that something you do get quite excited by that, by being, when you get faced with these different parameters that are changing or becoming more difficult? We were talking just before we started this interview about LA and about how, things are becoming difficult due to budget constraints and things like this. Is that something that you find is a little bit of a playground, something that you can go, right, what can I do within these parameters?
It's tricky because I don't want to wish that on myself to always be dealing in that world. I think, I've done a lot of it, so I can be very nimble and I can work well in those environments. But I still, no matter what the project is, I always try to prep thoroughly and to really get on board with the director or showrunner if it's a TV show, and kind of have an idea of what the objectives are, what the big picture is, what our best case scenario is, prep for that best case scenario, and then just be prepared that things happen,
Things are going to get said no to. Yeah,
exactly. And whether that's financially or logistical, or maybe it's just the wrong, we're just going down the wrong path. But having those conversations and it's having the conversations that kind of sets the tone for the project. I think that's really the way to look at it.
Yeah, well, we're segueing into your technical process now, and you mentioned something there, about prep and things like that. What is your approach to prep? Is it something, like when you get a project, do you go and, like with Shane, for example, who I've worked with a few times as a DP, he obviously will go off and look at art books or photography books or things like that, to try and find things that are a good look for the specific project. What's your approach to prep and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, it used to be like rips out of magazines and just having a big folder of all these things. And obviously now we have access to a lot of, digital archive and other ways of finding images. Yeah. You also don't want to just replicate the same images all the time. So sometimes it's just from seeing or from going to an art exhibition or something like that. Like, I think it's important in your downtime to explore all media. Not just what's on your phone, but, to kind of get out to the movies and to get out and see theatre and those sort of things. When I actually start a project, I really like to read the script through a couple of times. And the first time, I mean, often there'll be big print or there'll be things that just scream out at you. But I really like to read the story first as a whole and just get carried away with the story. And then I sort of start looking at, okay, what's inspiring, what's the challenge, and what are the pitfalls? I guess those are kind of my sort of go-tos. And then I start sort of breaking it down and going, sometimes the first thing that I need to address is like, oh my God, how are we going to shoot that? you know, and that's could be the crux of the whole show or movie. It's like we've got to drop a chandelier on someone's head. How do we, how's this gonna happen?
Yeah. And that's something that you'll look at as, right, how can I do this in terms of a shot? One of the things that I was reading about you was, I think it was a TV show. I think it was called The Letdown,
Yep.
which was all about childbirth and motherhood and things like that. And one of the scenes was I think you had 6 mothers. God, it's giving me palpitations just thinking about it, right? 6 mothers and 6 babies and a counselor all in one room, and they're all in one scene. And
Yep.
like, I think you had 4 days to shoot it. Just talk me through the approach to that, how you shoot it, how you would, what you did for it, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think also, we'd seen other shows with babies, so we really didn't want to go down the fake baby stuffy kind of world. That felt really wrong for what we were trying to achieve. But it was chaos. I guess my approach to that, it's obvious. The problem is going to be that there's screaming babies and they're going to want to be fed, and you're going to need to, sometimes they're going to be on, sometimes they're not, sometimes you're going to have a fake head, or make sure they're wearing beanies, or something, whatever it is. My solution to that was we built quite a big lighting rig over the sort of mothers group area, so that I could literally spin around and shoot 360 at any moment. Like if this baby was behaving, we could go and shoot that piece. If this baby was behaving, we could shoot that piece. If someone had to be removed from the scene, we could keep them out. So that was really the logistics versus creativity about that. Was like, let's get it lit in a world where I can shoot 360 if I have to, and then that meant, see, the director needs to be hidden somewhere in the location, so he could see 3 monitors. We had 3 cameras on that stuff just for those days, and yeah, it was a big lighting setup, and it was bigger than, like ideally it would have been shot on a stage, but in Australia we don't really shoot stage work that much, especially in television. It's unless you're on like one of the long running multicam, Neighbours or Home and Away or something like that. Otherwise you're using locations, so you've got to build in, and you have a 10-hour day in Australia, so you're building in your lighting, to that time frame as well. Any more time for turnarounds and things like that, you're losing your shooting day. So that was definitely a challenge, but I think we pulled it off. We really got that working really well. We had some doubles, especially the key babies. We had, we got twins, so that one could be sort of feeding or whatever while the other one was on set. So that was some help from.
Sorry for interrupting. Do you have the same problem with babies over there as you have over here, where you're only allowed to have them on camera for 3 minutes? So therefore, it's like you literally have somebody at the side of the set with a stopwatch for the moment they go on to the moment, like to 3 minutes, then they have to go. Do you have that over in Australia as well? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of rules and restrictions. But the ADs are across that, so they sort of keep us on that, and we know, when we're shooting a wide shot, it's going to be fine, or we're doing a top down, like an overhead shot, we know you're not going to see the babies, or you might focus on one if it's crawling across the floor. So again, it's just about being super prepared, knowing what your shot list is, knowing what you have to get. We almost treated it like an action, even though it wasn't, even though it's really a dialogue scene and it plays between the women. You kind of treat it like an action scene where you've got your boards and we've got that one. We've got all the coverage we need on that baby. Okay, you can relax, and sort of move your way through. Oh, no, that one's arcing up, so we better move on to the next piece of the puzzle.
I suppose it was like being back on that motorbike again, right? When you first started out, in terms of the danger of shooting and things like that.
There's unseen dangers everywhere.
One of the things about sticking with the Letdown, one of the things that really interested me when I was reading that article was about how you had made decisions based on the color grading, on the lighting in particular, to convey this sort of the mood and tone of the show. Could you talk us through that as well? Because that was really fascinating when I read about it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for the Letdown, we wanted it to be, it's a story about a first-time mother, and she's doing it tough, and she's up all night and driving around in the car, and it is a comedy, and we wanted it to be a comedy, but we wanted to have the sort of gravity of a drama. We wanted it to feel in a way, maybe slightly more European than Australian. Often in Australia, things are very saturated, and it's something that we see quite a lot is like this heightened naturalism. And I'm obviously the Late is very much a show in that vein, that you want to really tug at the heartstrings and get people. So having warm colors and sort of some of those rom-com vibes, it does bring people in, so it serves that purpose. But on the Letdown, we really wanted it to be, she's really just almost not keeping it together. Like it's a breakdown is around the corner. So then when she does have a win, when there are moments that she's kind of feels like she's getting it together and sort of success. We had one scene when they all, after they finished their kind of official mothers group, they actually go out and they have a day in the park, and it's lovely, and it's like, well, we're actually doing it. So then the colors can sort of come swimming back in there. But the rest of it, we tried to keep reasonably muted and some quite dark shadows. I mean, you still want to see, it's a comedy, so you want to see both eyes and all that sort of stuff. But I think we had a real, because of the nature of the drama, because of the sort of sadness and the sort of psychological side of it, I think we had a real opportunity there to twist with what the audience's expectations might be.
So was that something that you came up with, or was it something that you and the director had a discussion about? How did that work?
Yeah, it was a big discussion, and the director, the director's wife was the writer and showrunner of the show. So we had a lot of conversations about it, and I think it really comes from wanting to make shows that stand out. Wanting to put something up there that doesn't just look like, if people flick onto it or find it on a streamer, it feels original, and still true to the subject matter, true to the story always. But we want it to have its own look. Yeah.
That's similarly, I suppose now we come over to America and we're talking about one of the, I think it's a feature that you did was totally killer. And you created distinct looks in that for different periods of time. We went from 1980 to 2020 and all this kind of stuff, utilizing specific lenses. Talk me through that process, because I know that it looked at points in the 80s, a lot of it was set in the 80s, wasn't it? Because she goes back in time, this girl, and et cetera, et cetera. I won't kill it all for everybody, but when she goes back in time, we've got this very kind of John Hughesy kind of look about it. So tell me how you captured that. What was the process for going through that?
Yeah, I mean, John Hughes that was the reference, really. We wanted to sort of get into that world, and I think a lot of people can relate to it. It's set in a school. All the costumes were fantastic. What we didn't want to do, because so much of the film is set in the 80s, is stamp, like a grain onto it, or a washed out kind of sepia tone. Like, it just didn't feel right. We wanted the 80s to feel as vibrant and as welcoming as a John Hughes movie. So we really kind of explored that. We ended up using some gecko lenses, which are kind of like a lot of people are looking at these older vintage lenses these days and kind of either rehousing them or remaking similar veins. So we use the vintage 66, which is very much modeled on like a K35. Just has really nice flare, has a quite a soft contrast range. And that seemed to be, we did a lot of testing, and that was the right lens to use for that project. Mm-hmm. And then we knew that we needed to contrast it because we're jumping back and forth in the timeline. We wanted there to be no mistake that, you're in the contemporary world, and then you're back in the 80s. So we used the Sigma full frame prime. So that we shot on the Alexa, the LF Mini. Again, we just love this is probably the third or fourth project I've shot with that on that camera, and just having that large format is just so great. It just, the way it shows faces, the way it kind of depicts the face as a landscape, if you will. It really kind of, I feel like it's a really inviting format. So we ended up changing the lenses, keeping the camera the same, and then obviously there was some grading help as well. We used a bit more. Some low contrast filters. I think we used glimmer glass for the 80s material, and then just kept it clean for all of the contemporary stuff.
Yeah, I noticed a few rainbow flares sneaking in there. Was that the lens and the glimmer glass?
That was the lenses, primarily the lenses. Yeah, they have a really lovely sort of rainbow flare, which is, I saw that, I showed it to Hutch and she was just like, "Yep, that's great. Let's go with that."
Certainly felt very 80s at that point, definitely. You know what I mean?
For sure.
And then this brings me on to sort of, I suppose, Laid, which is, obviously, is it Nanachka Khan who you've been working with? Is that's who's involved in Laid?
Exactly, yeah. So I worked with her on, I'd actually operated for her many years ago on a show called Fresh Off the Boat, but I worked with her on Young Rock. We did a couple of seasons of that show, and then we did the feature together, and now Laid.
Yeah. And how did so in terms of that relationship, is that one that you feel like you can now have a much more kind of input into the look of the things that you're shooting together? You've got more of a symbiotic relationship going on because you've worked on a few projects together.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I feel like every project we kind of go back to the basics and build our way through, but we have a really good process for that. Nanachka is also really collaborative, or she really sort of gives me enough rope in a way, to really go out there and kind of explore and to show her things. So if I've got some ideas or respond to something in the script, I'll go out and do some preliminary tests and sort of present those and say, are we going down this way? Are we going down that way? And then it goes back to what I was saying before. Sometimes being wrong is actually the best part of it, because you can work out what's right together. If I put something in front of her and she's, you just get the look and it's like, okay, backing away from that. That's not, we're not going down that path. But no, she's very, very collaborative and sort of invites people to sort of bring the goods. So I do feel like it's a great relationship, and like I can, like I'm free to present things, or to discuss things, to really sort of have that discussion, and that way we both, really file down. We really get to what it actually is. So when we're making the film or the show, we've gone through all of the processes. We've chosen all the lenses. We've tested everything that's even slightly right, or some things that are wrong, and you kind of that works it out. So that if you can do all of that stuff in your prep, when you're actually on set and the clock's ticking and it's the middle of the night and you're running out of whatever, you can make decisions from an educated position, and know that we're making the right decisions together. We don't have to have too much conversation on set about those things.
Like a creative shorthand, and now that's developed, right?
Yeah, for sure. But it's a new creative shorthand for every project. It always comes back to what the project needs and what we've discussed and what we learned in testing.
You find yourself taking bigger swings because you've worked with Nanachka Khan a few times, and it's one of those where it's like, I feel like I can go for this, even if I'm going to get it wrong. I'm not worried about getting it wrong, Absolutely, yeah. I think that's the most freeing thing, is that I don't need to protect myself, with a stupid idea. If it's a stupid idea, I'm going to get told. That's great. But more often than not, if you're pitching something, it's it's coming from the heart, or it's something that you've read in the script. So I'm not going to be too far off the mark. Yeah. So talking about Laid and working about that as well, some of the choices that you made in terms of framing for that were I read were very interesting, and talk me through how you developed those visual metaphors and what you were doing there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, when we started with Laid, I knew that rom-com was where Nanachka was sort of leading the first conversations we had. It's like, it's coming from that rom-com world, and she had a sort of a lookbook of many references from all Julia Roberts movies, Notting Hill, and all these kind of really classic rom-coms. Now, it's not that, like, the movie's not that, but it draws on if rom-com is a genre, we wanted to sort of play to those tropes and to sort of set the scene, so that when we break it, do something quite contemporary, quite modern, you're taking people on a journey. You've kind of got them hooked with the romance and the kind of heightened world, and they're sort of along for that. And then it's quite confronting when
just to fill the audience in on that, really, basically it's about this girl who, it subverts the rom-com genre, doesn't it? It's all about, it's a rom-com, but then all of her exes are all being killed off, all the people that she'd been with. Yeah, sorry, just to make sure that everybody understood where that was going before you explain.
Classic murder comedy, really, is sort of the vibe. Yeah. So I think that's the idea, is that we make it really, you set the scene, you sort of get people thinking that this is a classic rom-com and getting on board with that. And, she's in the dating scene. It is very contemporary. We're sort of, using a lot of, devices and sort of hooking up through apps and things like that. And then because people are sort of on board and can relate to it, it's shocking when suddenly people start dying, and we don't want to pull any punches on the deaths. We're really sort of leading in. Some of them are quite graphic. And to the point that, even when we read the script, not all of the deaths are seen on screen, but as we were reading it, there's certain beats where we're just like, oh no, it feels like, we need to see more. We need to kind of keep that alive, to keep the threat and the danger alive, because you have to believe that Ruby, the character that Stephanie Hsu plays amazingly, is going on this journey and trying to find out what the hell's going on, what's happening to her.
Mm-hmm. So how did you then, so in terms of talking about how you created these visual metaphors and things like that, I read that somewhere that what you were doing was you were, deliberately framing a slightly off, I don't want to kind of ruin this bit for you really, in terms of, because I feel like you'll explain it a lot better than I do, but the framing was slightly off in terms of, she was slightly off center in order to make it seem like things weren't exactly right with the world that she was in. Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah. And we did that both through framing and through lighting. We didn't want her to feel like she was, kind of finding her Hollywood light and was always perfectly framed. We always wanted just to get the audience feeling like, something's a bit awry. She's a bit off center. She's a bit, she's on the short side of frame when she's talking to people. She's not easy in her skin. She's sort of looking for something. So yeah, that came from the script, came from the story, and it was something that we wanted to use the camera and the lens to kind of subtly enhance that. Just to kind of keep it feeling a little bit uncomfortable. Yeah. And then what they did is give us the opportunity, when the music swells and the romance does come, then we can really give the audience what they want and to have those really beautiful close-ups. We end up actually switching to anamorphic lenses for those. Okay. And it really just takes you into Ruby's world, and, little push in on the slider, and, you just suddenly feel like you're inside, now I'm in the rom-com, now I'm actually in that moment. And then of course we use those both for the swelling romance moments, the moments when she's about to hook up with someone, or she's really kind of getting those love vibes. But we also use it to kind of as a bit of a sleight of hand, or a bit of a cheat as well. Sometimes it's actually a dangerous moment, or sometimes it's actually when she thinks there's going to be romance, but it's a slap to the face. So we sort of, we're manipulating the audience a little bit through that device.
It was bloody effective. It felt, it certainly worked. You know what I mean? And I think that's something in terms of, cinematography being used for comedy. You know what I mean? It really kind of was exciting to see different visual metaphors being used on screen, to create more comedy. And that really worked. So
thanks. Great.
Congrats on that. I heard that there was a few difficult nights filming in Vancouver from what I read. What was your biggest problem that you had? I know this sounds like such a cheesy kind of podcast question, but what was the hardest night that you had, or hardest occasion filming Laid, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, shooting in Vancouver is amazing and has great crews. They also have 9 months of the year of rain. And we were shooting in summer, so it was some of the shortest nights. In fact, we were actually shooting on the summer solstice, which was the shortest night. I think we had 5 hours to shoot, a massive scene. We only had the location, sort of a street lockdown for one night. So yeah, again, it's just down to really doing your homework and being prepared and knowing all the beats. We do almost treat it like a stunt sequence. We know all the scenes, and within those scenes, there's really important dialogue, and there's all the precious words that need to be said. So I need to make sure that my team are, it's basically like a military operation.
Yeah.
all the lighting fixtures, all the power, everything's in place, and we know the order we're going to go to get the day or the night, as in this case. And again, things do go awry. Sometimes a lighting device breaks down, or sometimes the actors gets a cold and you can't shoot that scene that day, and you have to pick up something else on another night. So all of those things happen. They happen to everyone. But I think the more prepared you are, in a way, that the more you can go with the flow. The more homework you've done, you're not going to fall over. You can always fall back on your homework, but if something changes, you can kind of stay on your toes.
Is that something that you would advise? Like, obviously, this is Filmmakers Academy, so we have a lot of aspiring cinematographers who tune in and listen to these podcasts and things like that. Is that something that that would be a piece of advice that you would give to aspiring cinematographers, to be ruthlessly prepared so that when things do go wrong, you're absolutely ready to pivot?
I think it's either way. It's definitely my process. But the most important thing about that being ruthlessly prepared is also being able to let it go. I remember back early days, I shot a film, a guy called Rolf de Heer, who's an amazing director in Australia. And we were shooting a scene. It was a small scene, but it was like a time machine, and my previous time travel movie. And the time machine sort of, puff of smoke happens, and the time machine arrives in the middle of a sort of a busy road, busy traffic. There's cars going past and all this sort of stuff. Now we had some traffic control. We had our area where we were shooting Lockdown, but what we hadn't kind of worked out or figured out was all the normal traffic, morning traffic going to work or whatever, was just streaming past in the background, which is fine, except they're all driving out the window of their cars looking like this, and they had a collision on our first takes. Someone rammed into each other, and Rolf just sort of looked over and just, not that he was saying like that was all us that would, we're responsible for that, but he's just like, no, we're not gonna go again. Like something about the process was interfering with the real world. Like we're causing a problem here. So we took that scene, and then a week later we shot a very similar scene, but it was shot at a girls' high school, and the thing arrived and a swirl of girls, went running through and were shocked. And, he found another way to tell it that wasn't impacting the world. So I think the lesson from that for me was that there's always another way to tell a story. If you kind of know what your story is, that's the most important thing. So all of the homework is about finding your story and finding what the sort of the kernel or the nugget of that story is. There's a million and one ways to tell it. So if it started raining, or if suddenly, something massive goes awry, you don't have to lose heart. Like there's always you'll find a way to tell your story. And that's the main thing, is to kind of be focused on that rather than get too frustrated about, we didn't get the crane shot that night, something like that.
I like that. So in terms of, you've just talked about Ralph de Heer there, and would you call him a mentor? Would you say that he was a bit of a mentor to you?
Absolutely.
So,
but also he's a mentor, but he was very much that period of my life where we were doing things with very few resources. We would shoot for 7 or 8 weeks, but it would be a crew of, a handful of people. And that means that you can, we can go into the middle of the outback or Flinders Ranges or places where you're on horseback to get into the location, things that you can't do with, a full American crew and the circus and the trucks and so his projects are scaled to suit, he's written them with that in mind. So you have to, I think he, as a filmmaker and a director, is also an amazing producer, because the whole idea, is encapsulated, and he understands what the outcome is, like what he's trying to achieve, as well as the process. I think that's really important.
Is there a lot of mentoring that goes on over in Australia? I'm completely, I'm novice to Australian filmmaking in that respect. I don't know what it's like in terms of young Australian filmmakers coming up and stuff like that. Is there a strong mentorship program going on there? Is a lot of stuff going on for young Australian cinematographers?
Yeah, I think it's more or less, the structure of it isn't necessarily that strong. There are definitely opportunities and some government initiatives from time to time that do promote a sort of mentorship. I guess what I was referring to was more of a casual mentorship, and that's what I'm lucky enough to have over the years is people that are happy to share their ideas. And I think if you ask the right questions at the right time, I've always found that to be definitely part of the Australian way. Even going back to getting the job washing cars, through the ACS, there's people out there and they're passionate about what they do and they're happy to share their knowledge. And I still, to this day, there's people that I can call on, or pretty much, anyone. I think I could probably find a number or a contact if anyone I found, had done something. I'm just like, oh, how did they pull that off? And if they weren't, in the phone book or it wasn't in the American Cinematographer magazine, you could still probably track that person down and find out how they went about it. People are pretty happy to share their ideas on the most part.
Do you miss it at all? Like being back in Australia and the Australian way of filmmaking? Do you miss that at all? Like being over here now?
I mean, I still will go back and shoot projects in Australia. And the offers still come up from time to time.
Yeah.
I think at the moment where I'm at, the scale of what's possible in America, and America as the sort of spot to launch for the rest of the world, where you don't end up necessarily shooting here, but the scale of the projects here is still bigger than what I was shooting or what I could be shooting in Australia. But I do love the way films are made in Australia. But as I said, there's amazing crews everywhere now. So I love shooting with crews in Atlanta have been fantastic. Vancouver, the UK is fantastic. So I feel like it's the right project. The project leads you, and then the people. I also love working with Nanachka. Obviously, I go anywhere to shoot with her. Trent O'Donnell's another director from Australia that I've worked with a lot, and as soon as the phone calls, I'll be off to support him. So I think the material is super important, and then the relationships are super important, and the location. You just kind of work that out, because often. Even when we were setting up to shoot Letdown, it's a time when it could have been North Carolina or Portland, or it happened to be in Vancouver, which was great. But you never know until you know.
No, and I suppose that's the beauty of filmmaking, really, and it takes you all over the world, and you get to see all different kinds of all different things to shoot. Especially when we've talked about your career, we've talked about the fact that you went to Yosemite and you were shooting there probably when there was the fewest number of people in Yosemite ever. I imagine that was pretty cool. I don't think you struggled to find something to shoot then, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And and then through my sort of documentary work as well, and some commercials, I've got to travel. Well, I've been to Africa, I've been all across Europe, places like that. So it's that side of the job is incredible, and you need to be the kind of person who likes to travel and enjoys that.
I suppose this goes back. I mean, I'm not going over old ground here, but I suppose that when you look back on you starting out in this career, were the DPs whose work you looked at and you went, that's the kind of DP I want to be. That's the kind of I suppose we all say Roger Deakins, don't we? That's kind of our guy. But is there anybody who you particularly looked up to and went, that's the person who I want to emulate, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a twofold kind of question, because there's I remember Anthony Dodd Mantle and Chris Doyle and those sort of guys were, just doing such extreme, interesting stuff. And I do love that is the hanging off the side of the motorbike kind of analogy, they're just out there making film happen. And now I think it's probably, as I've gone on through my career, it's people that I've either met or you can tell. I think in some ways it's also important for me to have people that are mentors and supportive and really nice people about the way they do their work, as well as being good. It's not good enough just to make pretty pictures. I think it's, for me and for what I sort of hope to do is to be a good boss and kind of have a good experience while making a film, and hope the film is also incredible.
Yeah. So I suppose we're getting into the more sort of rounded things and things like that. Is there any advice that you would give to aspiring cinematographers? You know, having been through your career and things that you're doing, obviously you're not finished. You got an awful lot more to go. But is there any advice you give to people who are coming up and coming either from, you know, Australia or even like somewhere where I'm from, the Northern England, where it's nice and kind of a bit barren up there. It's not very much going on in terms of how they can progress and how they can become cinematographers themselves. Is there any sort of wide advice that you would give to those people?
Look, I mean, it's different. Everyone's journey is different, but I feel like, you know, or even just going back to what we were talking about before about prepping and you know, the cheapest part of filmmaking is your prep, you know, is the stuff you can do yourself. You know, so I think having a focus on that and asking and trying to discover the pitfalls and sort of finding solutions before you're on set, I think that's probably the best thing. So whether you're, you know, doing a massive, you know, getting an opportunity to do your first feature or your first big commercial versus just shooting something with your friends, it's still going to be the same process. You're still going to have, you know, you need to shoot on a camera, you need to have a crew, you need to get a location, you need to have, you know, good actors, you know, like all those sort of things are the same problems, the same process. So I think, you know, that would kind of be my advice, is just to, you know, is to do your homework and to kind of set yourself up to succeed, you know, rather than trying to just will it to all happen on the day. Because I think if, you know, the more you leave up to chance, the more that can go wrong when you're actually on set, and, you know, and everyone's passionate, you know, in the industry. So, you know, that's where people can kind of, you know, you spend 20 minutes discussing something and that's a shot you haven't got. So, you know, I think, the more you can kind of do your homework beforehand would be my,
I suppose my final question for you would be about, obviously we've got all these kind of things going on now. We've got AI, we've got automated tools, we've got all these kind of things that are coming into our industry right now. What excites you most about the future of cinematography, the future of filmmaking, and what challenges do you think that, you know, you yourself or we all need to be prepared for? That's
I mean, I think, you know, like it's a big question, and one that we don't have all the information for. But traditionally, I've always been a supporter of technology. Like, I think it's important to, you don't have to be the master of it, but I think it's really important to know what the benefits and potentially pitfalls of, you know, some AI technology. I mean, in Resolve, it's all over the place, Photoshop and these sort of things. So, you know, people are definitely going to use those tools, and I think it's important that you have a handle on it so that you can choose if it's the right thing for you to use. In terms of the bigger question about where it's all going, I mean, I still feel like, you know, human stories are what we want to see. We want to see other faces of other humans, and we want to believe what we're being told. How you assess that is going to be a changing sort of field for maybe forever, but maybe for, you know, at least for the next few years. But I think people are still going to want to see good stories told well. So hopefully we've still got a few more years doing this.
Absolutely. Well, before I finish up on this, I actually have one sort of follow-up question on that, which is, and I'm not asking you to give away all your secrets here, by the way, Judd, I promise, right? But like with Shane, one of the things I found most interesting when I was working with him and with other DPs as well is they all have these little they'll found something that they will use in filmmaking that like none of us expected. Like Shane uses these 360 cameras when he's location scouting, so he can literally walk in with his camera on a stick and, you know, he's captured the whole building, and then he can upload it and he can say, right, I'm going to put all my lights here, 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 and here. And he's got other things, other little lights that he's created that he's, you know, managed to buy from Home Bargains or B&Q, I think we call it in the UK, but Home Depot over here, you know, all these things. Is there anything that you've brought as a DP that you think, right, that's something that, you know, I kind of like found and I thought that was something I used on set that was really excellent, that is kind of my little secret sauce? Is there anything, I'm not asking you to call things out of school here, but something that you might have used that just fascinates me?
I'm just trying to think. It's a bit on the spot. You know, like I think every job's got its own tool, and you know, I do. You know, like I'm often.
Do you find yourself doing that? Do you find yourself going and sort of finding tools and going, "Oh, that'd be really good"?
Oh yeah, I'm a mess. If I go through Home Depot, I'm a mess. It's always like things, the shed's full of them. But you know, and I think it's often like I'm adapting something to do a job that it's not necessarily made for. I think that's probably more, where my kind of bag of tricks. So it's not like there's a one-stop, or because I don't think I feel like every project has different requirements.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely have a little sort of ditty bag full of toys that, sometimes you just need to screw two things together, or sometimes you need to build something out from scratch. And I think that comes from my sort of documentary background and working as a sort of, with the smaller crews, is that you need to make it work. So whatever there's nothing that's too ugly and embarrassing if it does the job.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I asked you the question, just purely because the things I've seen people doing and stuff, like one of the coolest ones I've just witnessed recently was on the new Netflix show Senna.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, in order to make it look like he was driving this car, they had a drill and they put it into the side of the thing, so it made the camera shake.
Love it.
While it was next to it. It was such a cool thing. I thought, what a great idea! All these different things that they're using to create these different techniques.
And that's one of the that's actually, I just finished that show. It's one of the best uses of volume I've seen. Because they really they don't try to sell it as real world. They really the grade of the film matches the look of the volume, and it's using it in such an extreme way. I'm just like, this is exactly what this technology has been made for.
Yeah. Have you got to work with much in the volume yourself?
Only for I've done a lot of rear projection, so I've done years of rear projection work, and so the volume stuff I've done, haven't been total. I know people have challenges with it, and it really comes down to what the material is that you're putting on the screen. So I've done some traveling stuff, car sim travel, almost process type stuff with the volume screens. But in terms of actually using it as a big environment, I'm still keen to explore it, but it seems like definitely my experience with it is that you need a lot more prep time to dial in the material that's going to be on the screen. And often the work that I'm doing, people haven't made that decision. They don't want to lock into that decision so soon. They want us to have all of their post time. So often we do end up doing, some blue screen or something like that instead.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah. Well, Judd, it's been such a pleasure chatting to you, and I'm so grateful to you for having this conversation with me and talking me through some of your techniques and some of the things that you've done in your life. It's been fascinating, and I'm honestly really grateful to you for joining me on this pod. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thanks again, man. Thank you.